We're in Clara's living room, and we're just going to have a little chat about the old days. The good old days,
The good old days, okay.
So, what can you remember about your early childhood down in Illinois?
Well, I can remember a lot of things when I was quite small. I can remember my dad had, his oldest brother was a doctor, and he came to visit us one time, and remember him sitting under the telephone and leaning back on his chair, and us kids were all running around. Mary was a baby, and Ines was running, and she fell down, and she hit her corner of her eye on the baseboard. It was sharp and cut her eye, and my Uncle Will, he got his little black bag out and took a little pill and put it in the wash basin and put the water on it, and it turned blue. And then he fixed Ines's eye all up. She still got the scar there, if you look, in the corner of her eye.
I never heard that one.
Yeah, and I was pretty small then. I was just
I suppose 4. That was some kind of a disinfectant, I suppose.
Well, it was a disinfectant is what it was.
Copper sulfate or something.
Yeah. And he never lived all that many years. A couple of years after that, we went over there, and I rode in a boat. The Wabash River was out of its banks, and we went in this boat, and I remember being just absolutely frightened to death. We went over. They lived at Fairbanks, a little town across the river north of Hudsonville on the Wabash River. And then that time we was over there, and I'll have to tell you this because I felt awful big, and I was pretty small for my age, and Ines and I was about the same size, and she was always as big as me. And that night we were kind of hard put for beds, and they made me sleep in the baby buggy, and I thought that my life was ruined forever. I never forgot that. And I don't know where Ina slept. She probably slept with Mother and Dad, her married. And it was only about a year after that, and Dad died. Or not Dad, but Uncle Will passed away. Yeah, he was a doctor.
What? The house wasn't very big that you lived in.
The house that we lived in was my dad built it there, and he went and got the lumber off of Mother's white oak farm that her dad had willed her, was 7 or 8 acres, and Dad hauled the lumber, those white oaks, to the sawmill. Bert Gower and his dad and his brothers had a sawmill, and they sawed up the lumber and for all of the dimensional stuff, 2x4s and all that, and the joists and underneath.
I'm going to turn it off.
And I think for the finishing boards, he took that someplace and got it planed. And it was the fanciest stuff you ever had. So darn many little curly McHughs on it that you couldn't. It was the hardest stuff to wash I can remember when I was a kid, because I was 14 years when we came to Canada, you see.
How many rooms did it have?
It had 2 rooms and a pantry downstairs and 2 rooms upstairs. And I don't know what.
And there was only, how many of you by the time you left?
Well, there was 8 of us kids.
8 kids and 2 grown-ups.
2 grown-ups. Yeah. Mother and Dad always slept downstairs in the front room. They had their bed in the front room. That was a great thing down there. An awful lot of people had their bed. The front room had a bed in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was quite a big room. I don't know the size of that house.
Can you remember when they built the barn?
No, they built the barn, I think, when I was a baby.
Oh.
Before I could remember. Yeah.
One thing that I remember when I visited there was the milk house, or the pump house, or whatever you called it.
Dad Dad made the blocks for the pump house. He made the cement blocks. He was 2-3 years building them. Whenever he had any spare time, well, he'd go, and he did it down in the barn in the driveway. And
make another block.
he'd make another block. He makes up a batch of cement, and that's still standing.
Yeah. Can you tell how it worked as a cooler for the,
Yes.
for the milk?
Yeah, I can do that. He built it just outside from the well, and then he built a well porch over the top of the well, and we had a pump, and there was a thing that you could, a lever, and then you could turn the water, and it would go
Inside that.
Yeah, we could turn it off so it wouldn't freeze up in the wintertime. And there was a trough there, and the water went through a pipe and up into, and there was a big milk trough up there on one side of the one of the rooms. One of the rooms was built what they call a warm room, and it was just like an upground cellar is what it was. And it was for vegetables and fruit and that sort of thing. And it stayed cool in the summer and stayed warm in the winter. It never froze in there. But in for the milk, it went, and there was a big milk trough, and it had water. The water run in it, and it was just deep enough that we could set crocks. We put the milk in big gallon crocks, and it set in there, and they floated in there, and the water went, and there was an overflow, and the overflow went out into the horse trough.
So every time you pumped water,
whenever we pumped water,
whenever
we pumped water, well, it would cool in the summertime. Now, we didn't do that in the wintertime, of course.
I remember seeing that, and I was pretty impressed with it.
Yes, it was quite something.
It's
Quite an invention that Dad did.
No refrigeration in those days.
No, there wasn't. And we used to go in there, and we used to do our churning in that little building because it was nice and cool. It never got real hot in the summer.
You didn't have a cream separator either, eh? You just skimmed
We had a cream separator the last year we were down there.
Yeah.
And it was
before that, you just skimmed it.
Yeah.
Off of the crock.
Yeah, we just set the milk in the crock, and then the next day, well, you'd skim the cream off.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get it all when you do that way.
What did Dad grow mostly? I can't remember.
Well, he grew mostly wheat. Not wheat.
Corn.
Corn. He grew corn mostly. And sometimes he'd have wheat, not every year. And oats never done anything. It was always awful light. It was too light that the horses, if you fed it to them, they got choked on it.
Oh, for God's sake.
Yeah,
it was
that's
all
right.
hull,
It was all hull. That's right.
Yeah.
It was all hull.
How big a farm was it anyway?
Well, there was 86 acres.
86 acres.
Yeah. There was 80 acres in the front, and then they bought 6 acres at the back there from one of the neighbors. Gosh, they bought that from a cousin of mother's.
80 acres is like a half of a quarter section.
Yeah. And but Dad, lots of times he rented some land from other people. And then they had that, I said 7 acres of timber. There was 10 acres out there. And now we went by that when I was down there last time, and the trees, everyone's been cut, and it's all broke up. Dad broke up. He cleared some off and broke some land out there, but never very much.
Well, no. What brought about the decision to move to Canada?
Well, Mother had poor health, and Dad couldn't get any more land around there. It was all taken up. You couldn't buy it for love nor money. Didn't have the money to buy it. But Wickeisers had come, our closest neighbors, had come up to Canada. They came up in 1904 and settled up in the Red Deer district. And then eventually they went to Uxley district. Well, they came back in 1914 or 15. Rebecca was about 2 years old. It must have been 15 or 16. And they came back for a visit, and they kept telling what a wonderful place it was. So Dad come up the next summer. So it must have been 2 years before we came up in 17. And Dad came up the next summer to look for land and for the harvest. And he was going to make money through the harvest. And it rained all the time he was up here. He didn't make hardly any money at all because harvest was really prolonged. And it was an awful wet summer.
Did he buy then?
He put an option on the land that we bought there at Pine Lake. On that land, he looked around, and he thought about some land around Huxley, and then he was looking for a house that was a good sized house. He didn't want to have to build a house, so then they decided that they were come, and then the next winter we all had the scarlet fever, and then Mom just didn't recover from that, and the doctor told Dad that he thought Mother should go to a new climate because her dad and mother had both died with TB, you see.
Yeah.
And a doctor was afraid she'd get it, but she had no signs of it at all.
Well, I guess she actually had it according to what happened in later years.
She had pneumonia half a dozen times, and she had scars on her lungs from that. From the pneumonia, she had pneumonia so bad. Well, anyway, so then the next spring they decided that we'd come to Canada, and Dad just sold stuff around. He never had a sale, and we loaded everything up.
That was quite a logistic affair to move a family, and he brought.
Him and Ray brought the animals. They brought 4 horses and a drill. No, he didn't bring a drill. He built 4 horses, a binder, a mowing machine, and a rake, and a wagon, and a surrey, and a buggy.
I can't remember the surrey, but I sure remember that old top buggy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know whether.
Well, it was pretty well brand new when we came up here. Well, not brand new. I think we bought that second hand, and Dad started up here. I don't know
Did they bring any cattle or?
No, we didn't bring cattle because there was a lot of hullabaloo about not bringing cattle in here.
I suppose there
was you had to have them tested and all the rest of it. But he brought the horses, and they had to be checked. They had to be tested for glanders before you could bring them up here. And he had 4 heads, and he brought old Nance and Snap, and Doll, and Joe.
Fly.
Fly, and
Snap and Fly was just a colt, I think.
Yeah, well, she was about 2 years old, and then Joe. I don't remember if old Doll had him that summer before we came up here, and he was just a colt.
I don't remember him. I sure remember old Snap.
Yeah.
And Fly.
Yeah,
we had them for years after I was growing practically.
And old Fly and old Nance. Fly was old Nance's colt.
I rode both Snap and Fly to school.
Yeah. Well, anyways, they left quite a bit.
Well, then, of course, they had all the household.
They had
all the furniture and everything.
All the furniture and everything.
So that meant you guys had to move out. So where did you stay?
Well, we went to Aunt Stella's and grandmother's. Just stayed around, and Aunt Elsie and Uncle Frank, and visited around for a few days before we left. And then when we left, Wilbert stayed to help Mom with the smaller kids. Well, Rebecca was 3 or 4, and the twins were just little folks. And we came on the train. We got on the train the 21st day of March. And I think we were the 3rd day we arrived. We were 2 nights on the train.
Ray went with Dad,
Ray
and
went
Wilbur
with Dad.
stayed
Yeah.
and helped.
And
He
when
was
they
sort
was
of
in
the-
North Dakota, they got snowbound for about 10 days. Something like that.
Okay, we're rolling again now, and we just left left him snowbound,
Yeah, they were snowbound.
and you guys had arrived
Yeah.
at Huxley.
We arrived in Huxley, and George Wickheiser met us with the big bobsleigh, and there was about 20 inches of snow on the ground, and it was
And
about 25 or 30 below.
What time of year was it?
It was in March,
Good
about
God.
the 23rd of March, if I remember right. And
Did you all stay at
we all
Wickheiser's
stayed
then?
up at Wickheiser's. They had a big house up there. They only had 4 rooms, but they were big rooms. 4 rooms and an entryway and a kind of a pantry.
Well, there was an upstairs in
Yeah,
that
there was
place
an
too.
upstairs, a big upstairs, and oh, it was a big old barn of a place. Had a hip roof on it. Yeah, we stayed there until Dad and them Ray arrived. And
How long?
Well,
were
we
they
was there
delayed?
a few days. We was there a few days, not many days, probably 3 or 4, if I remember right. I should have had that written down, but I didn't. No, none of us wrote. None of us had diaries then.
No.
Mary wasn't big enough to have a diary yet, quite.
No.
She was the one that made the diaries. And then they unloaded the cars and started moving up to well, first Dad went up and made sure that they bought that land. Him and George drove all the way up to Myers's. They bought that for Myers.
Yeah.
That land and the big house there by Pine Lake. And they went up and made the deal, and then they came back, and then they loaded stuff up. And
That was kind of dicey. Wasn't sure whether you had a place to move to.
no, we didn't know for sure. Dad knew he'd put the down payment. I don't know. He didn't.
Some kind of an option, I suppose.
It was an option, yes. I don't know how much it was, $100, $200. I think it was a couple of $100, but I'm not sure. It wasn't. He didn't pay an awful lot for that land that time, but my God, it took forever and amen to pay for it.
Yeah.
He likened to never got it paid for, because there was only 25 or 30 acres broke on that when we got there. And of course, he had to get busy and breaking more land, and he rented land, and so as to try to feed us all. And then
So now, did Wilbert and Ray stay around? Ray was what, about 16?
Ray was 16 and Wilbert was 18. Wilbert went to work for Jake Miller, I think. He worked for Wickheiser's that first summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, he worked for Wickheiser's that first summer, because
He never really was at home, was he, after they moved up
not
here?
very little at a time. Maybe spent the winters at home or something like that. But even in the winter, he used to go out working too, because he worked for Walter Scott one winter.
Now, did you girls all go to school up at?
We started to school. School was on when we were there, and we started to school about a week after we got there. And there was school all summer until Christmas. And then when they had the Christmas concert, they closed the school. And it was closed then until university was out in the spring. And that was in April. And then we got a teacher, and that was Chrissy Hunter. And I went to school 1 month. And that time, and I got the measles. And I never went back to school, because Mother was expecting you.
Me?
Yeah, and she never was well. And after I got over with the measles, I had to stay home, and I got so far behind Ines I wouldn't go back to school.
What grade were you in?
We were in grade 8.
Grade 8.
Yeah, we went into grade 8 after we come up here. A lot of things we were farther ahead than they were, and a lot of things, of course, we were behind. And,
And Rebecca, of course, wasn't old enough to go to school.
No, she didn't go to school. The twins went to school, and Mary, and Ines and I, and we went to school in the old Surrey and drove the horses. We all drove old Snap and Fly, I guess, to school. And
that Surrey would have 2 seats.
it had 2 seats, yes. And it had a top, but they took the top off to bring it to Canada, and Dad never got around to putting the top back on it. It wore out right in the garage there.
I think we have one picture somewhere of you girls in the Surrey.
Ines had a picture, and Mary's got a picture of the at school in the old Surrey. And I don't know whether she knows where it is or not, but and now what is it you want to know?
Well, I kind of lost my notebook here when we were...
Well, I was going to tell you about the first time I ever rode on a train. I was just past in the summer after I was 4, and there was Ines and Mary and I and Mother. We went up and visited Aunt Kate Brown, and that Aunt Kate, we went to Neogi. That was just a little ways from Urbana. And Aunt Kate was Mom's father's sister. And we went up visiting, and Dad took us to Bel Air, which was about 8 or 9 miles straight west of where we lived, and put us on the train there. We went to a little town called Wheeler, and we visited a cousin of Dad's, and then we stayed overnight there, and we had to take another train. We had to change trains there to get to Neogi, and it wasn't that far. I don't know, maybe 70 miles. I don't think it was any more than 70 miles anyways. And we went up there, and when we was up there, I saw one of Mother's cousins, and he was a bachelor. I thought he was an old bachelor, and he's only 29. But he had long whiskers, and he braided his beard and tied a red ribbon on it. He'd just go well with the young people nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd just fit right in.
Funny how you were what, about 3 years old?
I was 4.
4.
I was just 4, Pat. And
there isn't many things that you remember from before you're 4.
No. Well, I remember the day Mary was born, and I was 4. And I remember a few things that happened before she was born. Not a terrible lot of them, but the odd one.
Yeah.
But one thing I suppose why I remember that, Aunt Kate and Mother, and they took Mary with them, went shopping one day, and I can't think of his name now. I want to call him Charlie, but I don't think he was Charlie. There was another one named Charlie, and I can't think of his name. But their last name was Brown, but this was Mother's cousin. And while Aunt Kate and Mom were away, they had pigeons at a nest up in beside the chimney. There was a kind of a gable end, and he took us up, Ines and I, and took us out that window and up onto the roof of the house to show us these pigeons. And Mother just about had a fit when she came home and found out. And I've got a picture of that house. I wrote to his niece. I got his niece's address, and I wrote to her, and she sent me the picture of that house. I'll show it to you later on. And that was a big highlight. And then when we come home, I don't even remember where Dad picked us up at.
I think that house that Dad built in Illinois is gone, isn't it?
It burnt down.
But the pump house is there.
The pump house never burned.
because
No.
it was concrete block.
Yeah, it was concrete
And the
block.
barn was there the last time we were there, but I understand it's gone now too.
No, it's still there. Well, when we was down there, Keith went and Lena took a picture of it.
Yeah.
But it had been kind of remodeled. There's some people living there again now. And those, well, I guess you'll have to read Audrey's letter that tells about, you see, the people that bought that place. He was married to one of the Maud Gower's nieces. It was a Freeland, I think was the name, and and she says they're all dead, and those people had 2 girls, and I think they're still alive. But Audrey tells something about them there. Anyhow.
Well, you were what, about 16 when
I was 14.
you were 14. You came up
Yeah,
here.
I was 14.
So you were at home for about 4 years.
I was home. I got married in 21.
21, and you came up in 17.
17. So that's 4 years. Yeah.
So you was just a bit of a kid when you got married.
I was not quite.
Nowadays,
19.
if one of your kids decide to get married at 18, you'd say that you're too young.
Well, I guess that's right. Yeah. Like when Ken got married, well, he was 20, and Joyce, she was 17. Of course, that didn't work out. So.
Well, now you've lived here on this place how many years?
Well, we moved over here in the spring of 31.
1931.
We lived on this section. We lived on the quarter south of here since 1926. And then we bought this quarter, and we've been living here ever since. We'd moved quite a few times trying to get a toehold before that. And money was scarce, and land was all taken. And it was a big price at that time. Wasn't much money, but it was a big price.
Money was awful dang scarce.
Yeah, money was so scarce, I'll tell you, a nickel was harder to get than $5 is now, maybe 10.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I'm sure it was. It's pretty hard to believe. I can remember when calico was only 3 cents a yard. And we used to buy sugar when we was first married. Well, sugar, you could buy 100 pounds of sugar for $2.50. And flour, you could get 100 pounds of flour for $1. There's not much difference now. Well, flour is a terrible price, but wheat is an awful price. It's going to go up. They tell me it's going to be a little bit more. But there's really no comparison. Grain is a terrible price. They got good price for their rate this year. We're kind of jumping around here on this.
Mm-hmm. Well,
We're getting ahead of the...
We'll take a rest. This is Elizabeth France Barrett, who was our grandmother Wilbert's mother.
That's right.
You married Ann Barrett, who married Philip Wilbert.
That's right.
And she is our maternal grandmother.
Yes.
And this is Philip Wilbert, who is our maternal grandfather. This is Lena Wilbert, who married Otto Faught, who's our parents. This is when she was at age approximately 15. And this is Lena Wilbert Faught at age 18.
Then action. That is such a pretty red. Yeah. Seems like he's got some here and some. Yeah.